Chapter 451. That kiss was just as hot and scorching as his body. She was so hot that she almost jumped. She wanted to move, but her body was surrounded by hot iron. She couldn't move. He kissed her deeply, as if he wanted to melt her whole body into his. Peichichi, what should I do with you? I tortured you. I forced you. But in the end, I found out that I was the one who was torturing and forcing me. He had too many unreconciled feelings, and all these unreconciled feelings turned into a scorching kiss. Her face was flushed and her heart was racing. Her soft moans were crushed by his lips and tongue. She swallowed her breath. Around them, there was the sound of car horns and men's whistles. However, those sounds seemed to come from thousands of miles away. In their world, there was only that small world left. His breath infected her in a domineering manner, so hot and humid that she couldn't tell who was whose. There was only the sound of each other's breathing and their heartbeats. Their hearts were so hot that they felt as if they were about to jump out of their chests. They were pressed against each other, and their hearts were beating just as fast. When his lips left her, her little mouth was slightly swollen. She was kissed so hard that she looked at him in a daze. He was the same. His breathing was slightly chaotic, and he wasn't as calm as he usually was. Peichichi, you're the one who said you loved me. He suddenly grabbed her wrist and said coldly, but his palm was so hot. Peichichi instinctively wanted to withdraw her hand, but he had already dragged her to the nearest hotel. It wasn't a top-notch hotel. It was just a 4-star hotel. But at this moment, he didn't have time to care so much. He dragged her to the front desk, took out his wallet from his pocket, and threw it on the front desk. Get the best suite. The front desk receptionist was shocked. When she looked up and saw Tang Yu, she felt that he looked familiar, but a second later, she remembered something. God, he was actually the CEO of Shangyuan. But now, he was actually dragging a young lady to the K room of their hotel. This young lady looked so young and delicate. Hence, the front desk receptionist's sense of justice came out. She asked in a trembling voice, "Do you have a marriage certificate?" Tang Yu lowered his head and looked at Peichichi. "She's my girlfriend." Peichichi was trapped by him and could not move, but she did not make a sound, because it was too embarrassing. Seeing that she did not resist, the receptionist could not say anything else. She took out 2,000 yuan from her wallet and booked the best room. She also completed the procedures as quickly as possible. Tang Yu held the room card and dragged Peichichi into the elevator. As soon as they entered, he pushed her against the wall and used his body to block the camera as he kissed her. When the elevator arrived, he did not stop. Just like that, they hugged and kissed as they stumbled to the door of the suite. He quickly swiped open the door and carried her to the bedroom. Peichichi was thrown onto the king-sized luxurious bed by him. Her pure white face, with her long black hair, was breathtakingly beautiful. Tang Yu didn't have sex with her immediately. He just stood at the head of the bed and gently unbuttoned his shirt. Peichichi's eyes were filled with a layer of mist as she gazed at him. She also desired him. This was a fire that was lit in the middle of the night. If it was not extinguished, both of them would feel uncomfortable. Hence, she crawled towards him like a kitten, her little hand pressing on his finger that was unbuckling his belt. "Let me do it." Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of hoarseness in it. Chapter 452. Tang Yu grabbed her arm, his voice a little hoarse. "Peichichi, are you sure?" She knelt in front of him, her face only reaching his waist. At this moment, her face was buried and fluffy. It was a little cute and a little seductive. She looked up at him, her mouth slightly open. That absent-minded look made him want to kill her. Tang Yu reached out and caressed her face gently. He said slowly, "Peichichi, what do you want to do to me?" In his mind, he imagined the scene when she was drunk the last time. He only felt his heart skip a beat. When he looked down again, he saw her little head. He groaned embarrassedly. After a long while, he grabbed her little head and pressed her into his arms. After resting for a while, he pressed her down and came at her fiercely, until he was completely exhausted. The first ray of sunlight shone into the bedroom. Tang Yu opened his eyes uncomfortably and saw Peichichi kneeling on the sofa in her bathrobe, drying her clothes with a hairdryer. She had no idea how much he had seen when she was kneeling with her back facing him and there was nothing inside her bathrobe. Tang Yu leaned against the headboard and looked at her back view quietly. He even felt a little greedy. It seemed like he had not been with her for a long time. It was just the two of them. Last night, she said that she loved him. The corner of Tang Yu's mouth turned up slightly, his expression gentle. Pei Chi finished drying her clothes and carefully put on her underwear. When she took off her bathrobe, she heard a soft gasp. She hugged the bathrobe and turned around. At this moment, she was really beautiful. Her long black hair fell on her thin shoulders. The morning light shone on her youthful figure, softening her perfect curves. She was bright and alluring. On her small, oval face, there was a trace of moisture in her misty eyes. Her small mouth was bright red, and at this moment, she was biting her lower lip in disappointment. Tang Yu lifted the blanket and walked straight toward her. Pei Chi stared at him with her eyes wide open. She moved her body, wanting to escape, but her legs were weak. Finally, he came to her side and gently removed the bathrobe from her hands. His black eyes were stained with a layer of something profound. It was somewhat clear, yet somewhat indistinct. When she realized what he wanted to do, Pei Chi subconsciously wanted to escape, but her small body immediately fell into his arms again. She was hugged tightly by him. She closed her eyes and said in a trembling voice, "Tang Yu, it's been too many times." He leaned in close to her, and she was afraid of his hot breath. "Then, do it again," he whispered into her ear and carried her to the bathroom. Several more indescribable things took place there. When Tang Yu woke up again, it was already evening. The bedroom was very dark. Only the faint sound of the central air conditioner could be heard. His hand reached to one side, and he caught nothing. The blanket was also cold. He propped himself up and looked beside him, only to see a strand of hair left on the pillow. Tang Yu picked it up and looked at it for a long time. Then, a cold smile appeared on his lips. What a coward! Just as he was about to get up, Pei Chi came out of the bathroom, looking neat and tidy. Tang Yu leaned back again, a faint smile on his face. "I thought you left." Chapter 453. Tang Yu looked at her without batting an eyelid. Pei Chi patted his handsome face and took out 100 yuan from her purse. She placed it on his abdomen and said, "This is your fare for the night." His muscular arm immediately grabbed her wrist and he said unhappily, "Pei Chi, am I only worth 100 yuan? From last night until today, he had served her at least 7 or 8 times. 100 yuan. That was not even 20 yuan each time." His dark eyes stared into her eyes. "Pei Chi, is it only worth 100 yuan for you to moan so happily?" The gifted student Tang Yu had suffered an unprecedented blow. Last night, other than the first time when she had taken the initiative to serve him, he had been the one to serve her afterward. He had used all sorts of methods to make her happy. He had been so humble and subservient to make her happy, to make her tremble, to make her cry and scream. He was only worth 100 yuan? If 100 isn't enough, then 200. She generously placed another one on the table, and then looked at him with a smile. "President Tang, you have to understand a small boss of a company that's being suppressed. Not everyone can be like you, spending 100 million to sleep with anyone they want to sleep with." His dark eyes were still locked on her. He felt that Pei Chi was a little different. "So, it's only 200. She wanted to leave after saying that, but Tang Yu held her back. He looked at her and said slowly, "Pei Chi, will you give me 200 yuan if I make love to you in the future?" She was stunned. There seemed to be nothing wrong with his logic, but there seemed to be something wrong. She immediately understood and reached out to pat him. She picked up her purse and walked to the door. "It depends on whether I'm willing to sleep with you or not." Tang Yu leaned against the wall and watched her leave, but he was in a good mood. His good mood continued until the customer service came, and his mood became even better. Pei Chi had finally remembered to order a meal for him. Honestly, he did not force her to stay because, after a day, he was really a little exhausted. It wasn't easy for a man to do it many times in a night. It was normal for him to do it 3 or 4 times in a night, but he was also a little tired after what he did last night and today. After a simple meal, he returned to the rose garden. Tang Yu didn't expect that his mother, Lin Yun, would come and Tang Xian would still be there. Tang Xian had always been afraid of his mother, probably because of her guilty conscience. Lin Yun sat on the sofa while Tang Xian curled up on the other side. She pretended to be reading manga, but she was actually very nervous. Tang Yu walked over to Tang Xian, unbuttoning his jacket and tossing it to her. "Take it upstairs for me." "Oh," Tang Xian replied, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She carried his clothes upstairs. Lin Yun didn't mean to make things difficult for her, but she really didn't want to see Tang Xian. Whenever she saw Tang Xian, she would be reminded of her lost child. Now that Tang Xian was upstairs, Tang Xian heaved a sigh of relief, but Lin Yun was also feeling better. Tang Yu walked over slowly and sat down on the sofa beside Lin Yun. When he leaned against the back of the sofa and the fabric of his clothes rubbed against each other. That sound made Lin Yun raise her eyebrows. Looking at her son, she felt an indescribable sense of contentment between his brows. Chapter 454. Lin Yun took a sip of tea and said indifferently, "You've met Pei Chi-Chi?" Tang Yu smiled and didn't say anything, which was a tacit agreement. Lin Yun put down the teacup and restrained her expression. She said seriously, "I remember that Sheng Yuan is buying the Pei Corporation, right?" Tang Yu took a sip of tea to moisten his throat before answering his mother. "Yes." Lin Yun looked at his indifferent expression and felt a little angry. Her son had always been so outstanding, but he had done all sorts of stupid things with Pei Chi-Chi. Buying women. Now he had caused such a big commotion. It would have been fine if it had been someone else, but it had to be Zhao Ke's daughter. This was something Lin Yun couldn't accept. "Tang Yu, what if I break up with Pei Chi-Chi?" Lin Yun looked at her son and said seriously. Tang Yu slowly sat up straight, but he didn't say anything. He knew his mother well. It wasn't a smart move for him to express his stance now. Lin Yun continued, "There were too many people last time, so I didn't want to give you face. But Tang Yu, you know what I'm thinking." At this moment, Lin Yun was expressing her stance. Tang Yu wiped his face and lay back. He closed his eyes and said, "Mom, can we not talk about this? Did I spoil your good mood?" Lin Yun's voice was a little cold. "Tang Yu, others may not know, but I know it very well. What are you doing all this for?" "It's just to make me feel pity for Pei Chi-Chi and soften my heart." Tang Yu smiled bitterly. "But Tang Yu, I don't care about anything else. I don't care even if Sheng Yuan has to be given to someone else. There's only one thing. My grandson can't have Zhao Ke's blood." Lin Yun closed her eyes. "I still remember the feeling of the child flowing out of my body." Tang Yu looked at his mother and said in a hoarse voice, "What if Chi-Chi is pregnant? Are you going to let her experience the feeling of a child coming out of her body?" This time, Lin Yun was a little angry. She glared at Tang Yu. "If you don't do anything to make her pregnant, she won't get pregnant." She couldn't sit still anymore. She couldn't continue this conversation with Tang Yu. Tang Yu smiled. "I might not be able to hold myself back." No matter how good Lin Yun's upbringing was, it was ruined by this outstanding son of hers. For the first time, she lost her composure. She picked up her bag and said, "I'm leaving first." She was afraid that if she didn't leave, she would hit her. Tang Yu smiled and stood up. "I'll walk you out." Lin Yun was also furious. She turned her head to look at him and asked mockingly, "President Tang, you still have the strength to drive?" It had been a day and a night, and he was about to collapse. She knew that young people didn't know how to control themselves. She was also young, but this was her son and Zhao Ke's daughter. Thinking about it made her feel uncomfortable. It was rare for Tang Yu to see his mother like this. He held Lin Yun's shoulder with one hand and picked up the car keys with the other. "Why would I? I'll always have the strength to serve you." Although his voice was calm, there was a hint of coaxing in it. Lin Yun was also a woman, and to her, Tang Yu was the most gentle weapon in the world. No mother could be indifferent to her handsome son, so she just glanced at him lightly. "When did you learn all this?" She paused for a moment. "Don't think that I'll let you and Pei Chi-Chi be together just because you're like this." Tang Yu laughed. "How would I dare? Besides, Chi-Chi doesn't want to be with me." Chapter 455. Everyone in B City knew how ruthless Tang Yu was to the young lady outside. He was playing this game with her behind her back. Chi-Chi. How affectionate. At this moment, Lin Yun felt something in her heart. No matter how different Tang Yu was from Tang Ziyuan, he was still a man. Although they were mother and son, she knew him well. The woman that Tang Yu wanted, he probably couldn't give up. Lin Yun was conflicted. She didn't want to see her son suffer. Although Tang Yu didn't say it, she knew that he was in a difficult position. Sitting in the car, Lin Yun and Tang Yu were silent. Neither of them spoke. When they were about to reach Shui Yunfu, Lin Yun said, "Tang Yu, this is the only thing that Mom can't help you with." Tang Yu's slender fingers gripped the steering wheel slightly. Just like his mother, he didn't want to hurt his mother the most in this world. So, he tortured Pei Chi-Chi. Because she was the woman who had been with him for the rest of his life. He would have a lot of time to make it up to her. His mother, on the other hand, could only slowly heal her own wounds in the long years. "I know. I can understand." He slowly stopped the car and looked at his mother. "Mom, I don't want you to force yourself." Lin Yun sighed. She didn't have the energy to be angry now. Tang Yu got out of the car, opened the door for her, and personally sent her into the hall. Lin Yun stopped and turned back. "You followed me all the way here. You must have something to say, right?" Tang Yu smiled bitterly. "Yes." After a moment of silence, he continued, "Chi-Chi isn't doing well. I think you know that too. Her birth was a tragedy, but for Tang Yu, it was just right. They just happened to meet. That night, he was drunk, but he could still remember that she was covered in a thin layer of sweat and timidly pressed her hot little lips against his. It was rough and seductive. Lin Yun's expression didn't change. She had always been indifferent, and these things couldn't move her. In the past, she did like Pei Chi-Chi, but with Zhaoku around, even Tang Xian was like this, let alone Pei Chi-Chi. Becoming a wife was something he absolutely could not accept. "Mom, I just want you to know that I was the one who pestered her. I was the one who didn't let her go. I forced her to do whatever she did with me." Tang Yu's voice was a little soft. "Don't vent your anger on her just because she's Zhaoku's daughter." Lin Yun always had a good temper, especially in front of Tang Yu. She never spoke loudly. At this moment, she was also a little angry, and her expression was a little cold. "Tang Yu, when did I vent my anger on her? If you want to talk about venting your anger, then I won't be like this." "But you looked for her, didn't you?" Tang Yu smiled faintly. Lin Yun was stunned, and asked unhappily, "Did Pei Chi-Chi tell you that?" Tang Yu pursed his lips, and his voice was a little hoarse. "No, I just know you." He went forward and hugged Lin Yun. His tall and slender body bent slightly, and he buried his face in Lin Yun's neck. "Mom, I'm so sorry for hurting you." His voice was a little hoarse. Lin Yun was a little moved. Tang Yu had always been precocious, and she couldn't remember when he had acted like this. It was a sign of weakness, and also a form of pleading. Tang Yu couldn't say it out loud, so he used this method to soften it. Lin Yun's eyes were red, and she took a while to control herself. She hit Tang Yu's shoulder. "You brat, I won't fall for this." Chapter 456. Lin Yun felt sad when she heard that. Her son was born into a wealthy family. Even when Tang Ziyuan had an affair, he did not beg his father. When it was his turn to meet Pei Chi-Chi, he became like this. He must have suffered a lot at Pei Chi-Chi's hands. Lin Yun loved her son. After a while, she said in a normal tone, "I won't interfere, but I can't guarantee that your grandfather will be fine." Her son had been gone for so many years. Actually, her hatred was not that strong. But Jinrong was still lying there. Perhaps he would never wake up in this lifetime. Old Master Lin would definitely not agree. If Tang Yu insisted on this matter, Shang Yuan would be in turmoil in the future. Although she and Tang Ziyuan had painstakingly built Shang Yuan for more than 20 years, and Tang Yu had spent the past few years, many of the higher-ups in Shang Yuan were old subordinates of Old Master Lin. It would not benefit Yu Shang Yuan to fall out with the old man. Tang Yu knew all this even if she did not say it. After a while, he straightened up and smiled. Of course. Lin Yun was a little unwilling. She glared at him. Don't think that I'm giving you my blessing." After saying that, she snorted lightly and arrogantly went upstairs. Tang Yu stood downstairs for a while. He took out a cigarette and smoked. He did not feel relieved. Instead, he felt guilty. How could he not know that he had made things difficult for his mother today? Lin Yun had hated Zhao Ku for so many years, but today, she had given in for him. Tang Yu finished his cigarette and called a young maid over. He gave her some instructions and walked out. When he walked out, he saw a black limousine slowly driving into the courtyard. He recognized it at a glance. It was Tang Ziyuan's car. Tang Yu called the young maid over. "Has Mr. Tang been coming here often?" The young maid nodded vigorously. Her expression was a little strange. "I've been here a few times. I even met Mr. Zhao once." "Zhao Yi?" Tang Yu smiled faintly and waved the young maid away. He could almost imagine how black Tang Ziyuan's face would be when he ran into Zhao Yi. It seemed that his mother might not have the time to care about his affairs. Dealing with two men was already tiring enough. The fact that Zhao Yi could come here, instead of being satisfied with the company's monthly meeting, meant that he had already made up his mind. Maybe Tang Ziyuan's divorce triggered him. That's fine too. Perhaps his mother was forced by Tang Yun to the point where she had no choice but to do what she wanted. With this in mind, Tang Yu walked up to Tang Ziyuan. Tang Ziyuan's gaze fell on Tang Yu's face, and he was a little surprised. After a while, he said, "Why are you leaving now? It's getting late. Why don't you stay for dinner?" His tone sounded like that of the male host. Tang Yu only felt that it was a little ironic. After betraying someone for more than 10 years, could feelings be mended so easily? He felt that Tang Ziyuan had returned alive. "I still have something to do later." He rejected her flatly. He didn't want to get involved in his parents' affairs. He also believed that his mother could handle it well. Tang Ziyuan paused for a moment, as if he just remembered something. "Tang Yu, you should break up with that Pei Chi-Chi. Your mother is upset these days." Tang Yu paused, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "It's never Pei Chi-Chi who makes her upset." With that, he left quickly. Chapter 457. There was no one in the living room. He asked the little girl and found out that Lin Yun was upstairs. Tang Ziyuan tidied himself up and slowly went upstairs. The little girl muttered downstairs, "He's not as good as Mr. Zhao." Also, she could tell that Madame Zhao liked Mr. Zhao to come over. Although there was nothing out of the ordinary, just drinking tea and talking about Buddhist scriptures, it was all good. But how did talking about Buddhist scriptures sublimate into talking about love? Every time Mr. Tang came, he was forcing Madame to remarry him. Madame was unwilling, but Mr. Tang would shamelessly come again and beg again. She felt that she had no respect for Tang Ziyuan and looked down on him. Tang Ziyuan didn't know what a little girl thought of him. All he wanted now was to remarry Lin Yun. When he got upstairs, there was no sound. He pushed open her bedroom door and saw Lin Yun resting on the bed. She was lying with her back facing him, one hand on her waist and the other under her head. The light green qipao outlined her figure well, especially her back, which was very graceful and especially charming. Although Zhaoku's 3 measurements were outstanding, they were still a bit loose, unlike Lin Yun's indifferent, as if she hadn't changed all these years. Tang Ziyuan was a bit moved. He walked over and hugged her from behind. His slightly hot lips touched the skin behind Lin Yun's neck, and he called out Yun Yun in a hoarse voice. Lin Yun was a bit tired today and felt like she was in a dream. The back of her neck was kissed, a bit hot, a bit warm. It was very comfortable. The long-lost feeling ignited her body. Lin Yun didn't move, letting the man behind her kiss her. The kiss went down, touching her shoulders. A pair of warm hands began to unbuckle her front, and his fingers almost pulled off the buttons because they were too eager. Tang Ziyuan was really excited. He hadn't hugged Lin Yun for more than 10 years, and he couldn't help himself. They had been married for more than 10 years, and he had never been so excited. She was no longer young, but her body and skin still gave people a very tight feeling, which was a unique body shape of a regular life. Tang Ziyuan's arm firmly hooked around her waist, and he pulled open her collar a bit with one hand, kissing her more and more. Lin Yun felt as if she was surrounded by hot water, bobbing up and down. She couldn't tell if it was day or night. She didn't want to wake up either. When the man's fingers slowly moved downwards, Lin Yun woke up a little and called out softly, "Zhaoyi?" These two words seemed to have sent Tang Ziyuan into the 18th level of hell. When he was kissing her and wanting to do that kind of thing with her, she was thinking of Zhaoyi. Tang Ziyuan's face was extremely ugly. He turned over and held down his charming ex-wife. Lin Yun's clothes were half undone. Her hair, which was usually tied up, was now undone, spreading on the snow-white pillow. It was an indescribable sight. Tang Ziyuan just watched, his heart surging with anger. "Yun, you and Zhaoyi, what's going on?" Lin Yun was now fully awake. She knew that she had accidentally called out Zhaoyi's name. This was also good. It also made Tang Ziyuan give up on this idea. She just laid there beautifully, looking at him with a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "It's about what happened just now." Tang Ziyuan placed his finger on her neck. "Did you do it with him?" Chapter 458. Lin Yun was still lying there calmly. She didn't admit or deny it. She just asked him, "What does it have to do with you, Mr. Tang?" Tang Ziyuan was slightly stunned, and then he was a little annoyed. Yes, he was her ex-husband, not her legal husband, so she could openly flirt with that brat Zhaoyi. Wasn't that right? He was furious, so he pulled Lin Yun's clothes and kissed her crazily. Lin Yun was shocked. She looked up, broke free, and pulled his hair. "Tang Ziyuan, you're crazy." He kissed her neck and said angrily, "Yes, I'm crazy. Yun, I'm going to make you mine today." What an awesome excuse. Almost half of Lin Yun's clothes were torn. Tang Ziyuan's eyes were bloodshot. He wanted her too much, and he was too afraid to lose her. He kissed her crazily, and his voice was intermittent. Yun, tell me you're mine." He was afraid that Zhaoyi would chase her away. He was afraid that she would say that she had slept with Zhaoyi. Tang Ziyuan was almost crazy. Perhaps he could be with Zhao Ku all these years because Lin Yun hadn't remarried. If she had, he would have shot that man. He kissed her crazily, but Lin Yun pushed him away and raised her hand to slap him. She used all her strength in that slap. It was a hot slap on Tang Ziyuan's face. He was stunned. After calling out to Yun, he sat up and looked at Lin Yun blankly. Lin Yun sat up and leaned against the headboard. She looked at Tang Ziyuan coldly. "Mr. Tang, you're not drunk today, are you?" He was a little bored. He touched his face and said solemnly, Yun, let's get married again, okay?" "I didn't mean that." Lin Yun buttoned up her clothes, but realized that she couldn't do it because he had torn half of it. She didn't care about the clothes anymore. She looked at him and said calmly, "Yun, we're in the past. I don't have feelings for you for more than 10 years. "Is it because of Zhaoyi?" he asked urgently. Lin Yun didn't say anything. She just sat there and looked at him. After a long time, she sighed and said, "Yun, you're still the same as when we first got married. Impulsive, like a child." Tang Ziyuan's heart ached when he heard this. When he and Lin Yun first got married, they were really, really happy. Only in front of Lin Yun could he act like a child. He recalled that he was indeed the dominant figure in front of Zhao Ku. Zhao Ku had once served him so tenderly, and he had fallen into her arms and lost the child in his heart. Tang Yun's voice trembled. Yun, I'm back. Do you still want me?" Lin Yun leaned there quietly and said after a while, "I don't want to." Her voice was soft and firm, but it was like a small hammer pounding on his heart. It was very painful. "I can't go back." He and Yun. Tang Ziyuan walked away in low spirits. When the little girl closed the door, she secretly spat on him. "This man is a scum." When the little girl went upstairs, she saw that Lin Yun had already gotten up and changed into her pajamas. The light green cheongsam was torn beyond recognition and thrown on the floor. Lin Yun said calmly, "Get rid of it. Don't let Mr. Zhao see it." The little girl's heart was filled with joy. She nodded and threw the bag away. She knew that Madame had Mr. Zhao in her heart. Chapter 459. Pei Qiqi's life became even more difficult. With Meng Qingqing's actions, the Pei Corporation was on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, Pei Qiqi had sold the land last time, and most of the shares were in her hands. Otherwise, the shareholders would have argued and she would have gone crazy. Little One went in and out of her office countless times a day, and there was no good news. Pei Chi was so thin that she looked like she could be blown away by a gust of wind. Moreover, it had been half a month since she was with Tang Yu. In fact, Pei Chi knew very well that if Meng Qingqing really wanted the Pei Corporation to be finished, he did not need to put in so much effort. He was like a cat playing with a mouse. He wanted her to die, but he didn't want her to die so thoroughly. If not for her father, Pei Chi would have given up long ago. It was not that she was willful and couldn't hold on. It was like a rookie fighting with an expert. The result was already expected. Little One stood there, feeling a little uneasy. Boss Pei, our reserve funds are almost used up. After this incident, some shareholders asked to withdraw their shares. Pei Chi felt that her father was indeed a good man. The Pei Corporation had a little bit of assets, and the most valuable was this land. In the end, it was clearly his private land, but it was transferred to the Pei Corporation's assets. This was the last straw that broke her back, and it could also be said to be the last piece of driftwood that saved her. At least, she could escape unscathed, but she would become penniless. How could she not know what Little One said? She paused and held her forehead with her hand. I'll think of a way. Little One sighed in her heart. She had thought of everything she could think of. She was just short of selling herself. At this moment, Pei Chi's cell phone rang. She picked it up and looked at it. It was an unfamiliar number. She picked it up, and it turned out to be Lin Jinrong's mother. Her voice was soft. Miss Pei, our old master wants to see you. Old Master Lin? Pei Chi did not need to think to know that it was definitely not a good thing. So she pursed her lips. What's the matter? No one in the Lin family dared to talk about this. Mother Lin was probably forced to make this call. After some hesitation, she said in a low voice, Miss Pei, don't worry. The old man won't make things difficult for you. Pei Chi smiled and said, if you want to see me, I have to see you. After hanging up, Little One said anxiously, we can't go. These people rely on their money to look down on others. Furthermore, now that Sheng Yuan is treating us like this, there's even less of a need to go. Pei Chi smiled and closed the documents on the table. She looked at Xiaowan and said, didn't you say that the Pei Corporation has no liquid funds? Little Wan was stunned for a moment. After a while, she said pitifully, yes, but, Boss Pei, old Master Lin is so old. He could be your grandfather. Pei Chi patted her with the document and snorted, nonsense. Her eyes were clear and distant. Since he's looking for me, I naturally won't return empty-handed. Little One stammered, aren't you afraid of Mr. Tang getting angry? Pei Chi picked up her bag. He's going to destroy the Pei Corporation. Why would I be afraid of him getting angry? As she said that, she pinched her face. Little One, look at how much I've lost. Why would I be afraid of him getting angry? Chapter 460. Pei Chi walked straight to the door without turning back. She only said, what do you think? How would Little One know? In any case, she had seen a kiss mark on Boss Pei's neck a few days ago. It was very suspicious. Is she with Mr. Tang again? Pei Chi threw her bag into the car and calmed down for a while before starting the car. She followed the address given by Mother Lin and drove to the Lin residence. The Lin residence was located in a private garden in the suburbs. The old master liked peace and quiet. He also had the style of a big family in the past, so the garden was very big. It was the kind that one could get lost in it, especially when there were two guards standing at the door, looking very imposing. Pei Chi's car slowly passed through the gate and drove straight to the main house on Cotton Avenue. She did not think that she would have to make a few turns. After driving for about 10 minutes, she finally arrived in front of an antique house. It really looked like a paradise. Pei Chi stopped the car and opened the door to get out. Mother Lin was already waiting at the door with a troubled expression. She actually did not want to get involved in this kind of thing. She was Jinrong's mother, and Lin Yun was Tang Yu's mother. Now that things had become like this, she might not be able to see her sister-in-law again if she did not handle it well. When Pei Chi walked over, Lin Jinrong's mother still sighed in her heart. She was indeed a very beautiful girl who was worthy of Tang Yu. It was a pity that she was born by Zhao Kuo. Pei Chi wore a pair of white slim-fit pants with a pair of leather boots. She wore a thin sweater with a beige trench coat on top. She looked fresh and handsome. It was a little different from what Mother Lin had seen before. However, she was a little thinner. Mother Lin said in a low voice, "Follow me in." Pei Chi followed behind her. It was an eye-opener. The place where the old master lived was like the palace. There were 3 entrances inside and 3 outside. The only thing missing was the palace maids and eunuchs. Mother Lin opened the innermost door. It turned out to be a room. Old Master Lin was sitting in front of a small table. There was an incense burner in front of him. The fragrant tea also emitted an unusual fragrance. This was a place where people could immediately calm down and also make people feel reverence. Pei Chi bent over and carefully sat opposite Grandpa Lin. Mother Lin's lips curled up in response to her actions. She had never seen anyone who dared to be so unrestrained in front of old Master Lin. Even the most pampered Tang Yu and Jinrong didn't dare to act rashly. Pei Chi sat down and looked at old Master Lin. The old man was still dressed in a light gray robe, looking as antique as the house. He merely lifted his eyelids and instructed Mama Lin, "You go out first and guard outside. Don't let anyone in." Mother Lin lowered her eyes. Yes. That attitude was really like the déjà vu of the great families of the past. However, Pei Chi wouldn't fall for this. She wasn't related to old Master Lin, so there was no need for her to be so servile to him. After the door to the room was closed, old Master Lin first moistened his throat in preparation for the roar he was about to make. He raised his eyes. Those old but sharp eyes were tinged with a hint of anger. "Miss Pei, do you know why I called you here?" "I don't know. You can tell me now, old master," Pei Chi said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Old Master Lin had been snubbed. He had wanted to strike first and put this girl in her place. However, this girl wasn't afraid at all. Chapter 461. Among all of Tang Yu's relatives, everyone was afraid of old Master Lin the most. However, Pei Chi felt that the easiest person to deal with was old Master Lin. Because he was honest, he would say whatever he had to say directly. He would not give you face, but he would not go overboard either. Old Master Lin's voice was deep. "This place is very well hidden. Lass, you have to know that even if I make you disappear here without a trace, no one will know." "Oh, I believe you. Even if my secretary accidentally finds out that I came to see you, you have a way to make her not say anything. However, old Master Lin, I think you're meeting me today to make me leave Tang Yu." Pei Chi paused. "If I disappear, you're also a man, and you've been young before. Will you never forget me and remember me for the rest of your life?" Old Master Lin's old face darkened. Why was this lass so difficult to deal with? She was sharp-tongued and not cute at all. Being glared at by old Master Lin, Pei Chi chuckled softly. "Did I hit your sore spot?" Old Master Lin huffed. "Even if you're so impudent, I can't let you marry into my family." Pei Chi smiled. "So, why should I be afraid of you? It's not like you're letting me marry into your family." Old Master Lin was speechless. "You're making things difficult for me and asking me to be submissive. Do you think I'll do that, old master?" Pei Chi's mouth was dry from all the talking, and she took a sip of tea. Old Master Lin had never suffered such treatment before. If she was a descendant of the Lin family, he would have flipped the table long ago. How could he tolerate such treatment? However, although this lass's words were disrespectful, she was standing on the right side of reason. They didn't like her, and yet she wanted her to be submissive? This was really unreasonable. Old Master Lin was angry, but he also admired her a little. If this lass was really submissive at this moment, he would look down on her. After thinking about it, he said directly, "I heard that Tang Yu is still making things difficult for you. As for the rumors about the 2 little ones sleeping or not, the old master and a little girl couldn't say anything about it. Most of the time, it was his grandson who forced people to sleep. How could he say anything about it?" Pei Chi did not refute his question and lowered her head to drink her tea. Grandpa Shang was an astute man. After observing Pei Chi for a while, he knew what she was thinking. This lass was not simple at all. She must have come here with a motive. Without batting an eyelid, he said, "If I give you a sum of money, Leave Tang Yu. Pei Chi-Chi's fingers froze on the teacup. She looked up at Senior Master Shang and asked, "What if I don't want money?" The old man's eyes were sharp. "Lass, enough is enough. Believe it or not, if you let me leave this place alive, I'll immediately look for Tang Yu. I'll tell him that I'm willing to be with him." Chapter 462. Pei Chi-Chi put down the teacup in her hand and smiled. "I want to work with the Lin Corporation." She paused for a moment. "As far as I know, the subsidiary company of the Lin Corporation, Marvel, has a project coming up. Working with the Lin Corporation was the most effective counterattack against Sheng Yuan's acquisition, because the Lin Corporation and Sheng Yuan were closely connected. If Sheng Yuan continued to be so aggressive, it would be a slap to Old Master Lin's face." Old Master Lin looked at Pei Chi-Chi for a long time and finally snorted. "It seems that you have been planning this for a long time. You were just waiting for me to come to you." This girl was really good at enduring. She had actually waited for an opportunity to make a move. He knew that if he ignored her when she came to him, he would only be humiliating himself. However, Old Master Lin was unwilling to accept the fact that he had been made a fool of by a little girl. But he was really afraid that if he did not agree, this girl would go to Tang Yu early in the morning. Old Master Lin knew about Tang Yu's craziness. These days, he had also come to a realization. What suppression, what acquisition? It was all a lie. He was obviously picking up a girl. But he, or rather, no one could do anything to Tang Yu. He had put it nicely, saying that he was taking revenge for his mother. This revenge was really good. He had gone to bed with her. The more Old Master Lin thought about it, the more upset he felt. He looked at the girl in front of him and couldn't help but recall that time at the Sheng Yuan headquarters. This girl was in Tang Yu's arms like a little lamb. But now, there was some maturity between her brows. She was not as weak as before. Honestly speaking, this girl was fated with him. But in order to appease the grudges between the younger generation, he couldn't open his mouth. He could only let this girl suffer. If she had to blame someone, she could only blame her family background. Old Master Lin thought about this and said slowly, "Since that's the case, let's do it this way." He took out a contract and pushed it to Pei Chi-Chi. "Girl, if you sign this, you can also participate in that Marvel project. In addition, I can personally inject 5 billion yuan into the Pei Corporation. I think these conditions should be very generous." As he spoke, his sharp eyes stared at Pei Chi-Chi. "Girl, not everyone can sit with me and bargain with me." The old man was always old-fashioned. He always felt that his grandson had slept with a girl, so he had to take responsibility. "I can't sleep for nothing." Money had to be paid for a breakup. This was a matter of course. Even if he didn't say it, Pei Chi-Chi knew it. The first time she met the old man, she knew he wasn't an easygoing elder. She pursed her lips and smiled faintly. "I know. Don't be in a hurry to sign. Look carefully before you speak. Don't say that I, Lin Jinan, bullied a little girl. If this gets out, people will laugh at me." The old man cared about his reputation, so he had to do his best in all aspects. Pei Chi-Chi lowered her head and clenched her fists tightly. After a long time, she let out a long sigh and wrote down the Marvel clause on the contract. She pushed it to the old man and said, "You have to stamp your seal on this." Old Master Lin looked at her deeply. "No regrets? Tang Yu is worth much more than this 5 billion yuan. Pei Chi-Chi smiled faintly. "I do regret it. Can you make me regret it?" The old man was straightforward. After stamping the contract, Pei Chi-Chi also signed it in duplicate. She didn't intend to stay any longer. She stood up and bowed. "I still have to thank you." Chapter 463. In her life, there were not many things that she could grasp or possess. If she could protect her father's company, she would be comforted. At least, Pei Chi-Chi was not a useless person. The old man was still sitting there without batting an eyelid. His voice was low and carried a hint of desolation. "There's no need to thank me. Lass, don't be so cruel to Tang Yu." Pei Chi-Chi smiled and did not say anything. In this world, there was only one Tang Xian and one Tang Yu. Tang Xian was too young and needed someone to take care of her. As for Tang Yu, he said to her, "Pei Chi-Chi, if you don't come to my side, I'll have to force you. She had never been able to hurt him. He was so strong and invincible. With just a flick of his finger, she would be doomed eternally. Pei Chi knew that if Tang Yu found out about what happened today, he would probably want to strangle her to death. She didn't care. The piece of paper she signed just now was useless. If she was still so naive and took everything seriously, she would be too stupid. She was no longer the silly Pei Chi. Even a fool would learn to fight with these people. If she took it seriously, she would lose. Of course, she knew that Old Master Lin knew what she was thinking. It was just that everyone had a tacit understanding. Old Master Lin was only stopping her from throwing herself into Tang Yu's arms so quickly. If he wanted to help her, why wouldn't she accept? When she walked out, Mama Lin was looking at her with a peculiar expression. She walked over slowly and stood under a cherry blossom tree with Mama Lin. Pei Chi pursed her lips. Is he still the same? Mama Lin naturally knew who she was asking about. She lowered her eyes and said with a slightly tense voice, he's still the same. After a moment of silence, she said, even Old Master Lin doesn't have much hope. That's why he's putting his hopes on Tang Yu. In the future, one of Tang Yu's children might be adopted by the Lin family, and it will be under Jinrong's name. Old Master Shang had mentioned this to Tang Yu last week, and Tang Yu had not objected. Mother Lin told Pei Chi all this because she wanted to tell Pei Chi that her identity was indeed not suitable to be Tang Yu's wife. She didn't say anything malicious, but just told her calmly. Pei Chi didn't say anything. She just grunted and didn't ask to see Lin Jinrong. She was too ashamed to see Jinrong. As she walked outside, the sunlight scattered on her body, leaving specks of golden light. Lin Jinrong's mother just looked at the girl and felt that she was surrounded by loneliness. Her heart tightened, and she felt a little sad. She thought that if all of this had not happened, this girl might have been Jinrong's wife and would have called her mother. But fate played tricks on people like this. Just like that, Mother Lin watched as Chi-Chi's figure disappeared. She watched for a long time. Pei Chi looked down at her own shadow as she walked. Pei Chi, look, everyone is against you two being together. So it was right to say that they should separate. It couldn't be more right, but she was still sad and still missed him. Facing his slightly angry face, she always gave in disappointingly. It wasn't because she couldn't stand his brutality and rudeness, but because she still couldn't get tired of looking at him after seeing him thousands of times. She still missed him, still wanted him. Pei Chi sat in the car and looked at the document. She pursed her lips and started the car. Only she and Old Master Lin knew about this matter. No one else would know about it. Chapter 464. Sheng Yuan Conference Room. Meng Qingqing briefly talked about the recent business situation of the Pei Group, and Tang Yu listened indifferently. He was confident in Meng Qingqing's ability. Meng Qingqing could take on the responsibility of a multinational company, let alone a small company like the Pei Group. After Meng Qingqing finished speaking, Tang Yu said indifferently, now, Qingqing, you can contact the person in charge of the Pei Group and discuss the acquisition. Discuss? Wouldn't it be a waste of time? It would be strange if Pei Xiaoqi didn't throw coffee in his face. Meng Qingqing expressed that he didn't want to take the blame, but Tang Yu had always been a man of his word, so he could only laugh bitterly. There was another thing he couldn't understand. Did the company's executives not care? How much money did Tang Yu have to burn to pick up girls? Did they just ignore them one by one? Meng Qingqing definitely didn't expect this. At first, there were naturally people who objected, but they were all settled by Zhao Yi. Zhao Yi wanted to be with Lin Yun now. He could understand Tang Yu's current actions, and he also regretted not taking action when he was young. If he had taken action earlier, perhaps Tang Yu would still be able to call him daddy. The meeting was almost over. In fact, there wasn't much to do. The main thing was that the master had asked me to do his private business. Just as the meeting was about to end, the door of the Shang Yuan conference room opened. Everyone turned to look at the door. There was a faint smile on the corner of Tang Yu's mouth. She was finally here. Pei Chi stood at the door, wearing a white suit on her body, like a fresh lily. Beside her stood Xiao Wan, and behind her were two younger men, who looked to be in their 30s. The point was, those two men were handsome. Although they weren't as handsome and noble as Tang Yu, their facial features were really good, and they were Pei Chi subordinates, Meng Qingqing had an immoral thought in his heart. At this moment, Tang Yu should be exploding with anger. You have Sun Feifei, but look at how Pei Qiqi has also brought De Xiao and Xiao Qiao to demonstrate. Tang Yu looked at Xiao Ran and asked, Secretary Xiao, what's going on? He lowered his head and flipped through the documents again, saying indifferently, if necessary, you can call security. Xiao Ran sighed. Who would dare to ask the security guards to chase away your precious baby? But the CEO really knew how to act. He looked cold on the outside, but in his heart, he wanted to throw his little darling on the conference table and do whatever he wanted. However, these were just Secretary Zhao's little thoughts. How could he dare to refute them directly? Tang Yu did not make things difficult for her. His gaze returned to Pei Qiqi's face as he gestured for her to sit down. Boss Pei, what's the matter? Just a little bit. Pei Qiqi walked over, and the two beautiful men behind her also followed. They stood behind her, and one of them pulled out a chair for her. Everyone in the room was laughing at that scene. Only Tang Yu's face was black. Were these two special assistants or managers? Wasn't he too good-looking? Pei Qiqi sat down, but she directly confronted Meng Qingqing. Special Assistant Meng. Meng Qingqing, who was called out, had been watching a joke at first, but now he looked confused. It was a disgrace to Shang Yuan. Meng Qingqing, who had been called out, coughed softly. Boss Pei, looking for me? Why did he feel like his skin was itching? Please, just look for him. Look for your Tang Yu to play with. Pei Qiqi smiled slightly. I heard that Special Assistant Meng is preparing to go to the Pei Corporation to discuss the acquisition. Meng Qingqing's skin went numb. Chapter 465. Pei Qiqi smiled, and Big Xiao and Little Xiao immediately handed over a document. This is the contract of intent that I signed with Marvel Corporation, which was put down by the Lin Corporation. The agency of Marvel for this season will be handed over to the Pei Corporation. Lin Corporation? Marvel? Marvel isn't. Meng Qingqing was just about to say it when Tang Yu raised his hand to stop him. He looked at Pei Qiqi and said calmly, so? In addition, the Lin Corporation will reach an agreement with the Pei Corporation to cooperate with them without any restrictions. Pei Qiqi smiled. In that case, President Tang, you don't need anyone to translate anymore, right? Tang Yu looked at her quietly, his dark eyes unfathomable. Pei Qiqi couldn't understand him. Tang Yu wasn't annoyed either. He just raised his hand and gestured for the others to leave. Meng Qingqing's lips moved. Tang Yu gave him a look and he went out. Only Big Xiao and Little Xiao that Pei Qiqi brought were left. President Pei, I have something to talk to you in private. You're not afraid that I'll do something to you, are you? He leaned there, looking noble and aloof. He didn't look like the person who had done the rash thing to her in the Pei Corporation's conference room. Pei Qiqi pursed her lips, stared at him, and didn't say anything. Tang Yu's eyes were filled with anger as he glanced at the two men. The two men were also practical. No matter how strong they were mentally, they couldn't withstand Tang Yu's stare. They quickly left in dismay. Only Pei Qiqi and Tang Yu were left in the huge conference room. Tang Yu sat still and didn't move. He looked at her lightly. Pei Qiqi, have you become capable? Needless to say, she had negotiated the contract with the Lin Corporation. In the entire Lin family, only the old master would look for her. As for the terms of their exchange, he wasn't interested in knowing now. Otherwise, he would want to strangle her. Same here. Pei Qiqi smiled. If President Tang hadn't forced the Pei Corporation to a dead end, why would I have taken such a dangerous step? The corners of Tang Yu's mouth curled up into a smile, and his gaze deepened. Your idea is not bad. The Lin clan and Shang Yuan clan were born from the same branch. But Pei Qiqi, don't you regret it? He bent down slightly and got closer to her. His warm breath brushed against her lips. Perhaps there's a bigger pit waiting for you. He kindly reminded her. Pei Qiqi smiled indifferently. I'd rather take a gamble if Shang Yuan were to acquire it anyway. Tang Yu didn't say anything else and looked at her thoughtfully. His gaze was probing and bottomless. Pei Qiqi didn't want him to see it clearly, so she got up. President Tang, that's all. I'll leave first. He quickly pressed the back of her hand, and his eyes locked on hers. Pei Qiqi, are you here to declare war, Or do you miss me? The situation changed so quickly that Pei Chi couldn't react for a moment, but his other hand had already cupped her little face, and he leaned over and kissed her deeply on the lips. The moment their lips touched, Pei Chi's body trembled. She was a little intoxicated, but more than that, she was embarrassed and annoyed. But not only did she not push him away, but she reached out and hooked her arms around his neck, making the kiss deeper and hotter. Tang Yu couldn't help groaning, and changed the angle to make both of them more pleasurable. Pei Chi enjoyed the kiss, but when he let go of her and was about to unbutton her shirt, she bit him hard. She really didn't go easy on him. Chapter 466. Pei Chi tasted blood and laughed. Just as she was about to let go, she felt something pressing down on the back of her head. You want to run away after biting me? His voice was low and hoarse. He was holding her, and their faces were touching. That scorching heat made her blush and her heart race. At that moment, she realized that they were so close that their breaths were almost fused together. She was half sprawled on the huge conference table, looking extremely pathetic. Let go of me. She was a little annoyed. Tang Yu's eyes were locked on hers, and his voice was a little bewitching. Boss Pei, you bit me. How should I repay you? You kissed me forcefully. She was so angry that her face was very red. She was no longer the calm Boss Pei, but his little pet, Pei Chi. Tang Yu chuckled. Then I'll let you kiss me back forcefully, and then I'll bite you. Is that even? That wasn't wrong, but it seemed wrong at the same time. Her head was spinning, and before she could react, she was kissed by him again. It tasted fishy, but he didn't care. He kept kissing her again and again. He kissed her until her toes were stiff. She opened her mouth slightly, and naturally, he could kiss her deeper. This kiss ended with Pei Chi in pain. She gave a cry of surprise and almost jumped up. Tang Yu actually bit her. Their sticky lips finally separated, and she let out a shameful moan. He did bite her, but it wasn't hard, and there was no blood. Instead, it made her feel shameful and dissatisfied. She was lying on her stomach, and she was as soft as water. At that moment, Tang Yu chuckled hoarsely. Boss Pei, do you want me? Her face was red as she glared at him. Her breathing was messy, but it was also fragrant and soft. She was cute at that moment. Tang Yu felt that he had always fed Pei Chi until she was full. He wanted her to taste the pain, even if he was about to go crazy from enduring it. His thin lips curled into a charming smile. He straightened his body and adjusted his clothes. Then, he looked at the petite woman. Boss Pei, I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself just now. This bastard. Pei Chi gritted her teeth and got up. There was still a wave of passion in her watery eyes. If Boss Pei needs my cooperation, I can reluctantly do it. He continued to speak coldly as if he was in a business negotiation. Pei Chi finally calmed herself down and slowly walked towards him. Her tiny hands rested on his shoulders, and her soft body nestled in his embrace. Her voice was also very gentle. Tang Yu. She was like a little kitten lying on his chest. No matter how strong Tang Yu's self-control was, he lowered his head and wanted to kiss her little mouth. Pei Chi raised her leg. Tang Yu let out a muffled moan, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Fortunately, she held back a little. Otherwise, the Tang family would have no descendants. Pei Chi was still lying on his chest. Her little mouth found a place to bite him where it hurt the most. It was numb, painful, and as if 1,000 volts of electricity had passed through it. He looked down and saw the little girl in his arms, giggling. At that moment, all his desire, all his anger, and all his unwillingness seemed to have subsided. His chi seemed to have returned at that moment. Even the pain in his chest and down there was sweet. Chapter 467. He watched as she slowly blossomed and became stronger. However, she was still a child in private. She would be proud of her progress, and she would want to show it to him. Although it was childish, he liked it. Pei Chi wanted to leave, but Tang Yu wouldn't let her. He reached out and stroked her hair. At that moment, his heart almost softened and he said to her, Pei Chi, come back to me now. However, he forcefully endured it. It wasn't time yet. She wasn't ready. That's it. Pei Chi-Chi, I'm willing to wait. But when I'm waiting for you, don't be with anyone else. Otherwise, I'll be really angry and the consequences will be severe. He pressed her down and his voice was elegant but a little hoarse. Pei Chi-Chi, if you don't want to do it with me here, leave now. She looked up and saw the brightness in his eyes. She knew very well what his eyes meant at that moment. She suddenly left his arms and ran away. And he didn't stop her. He only felt that she looked so cute. After a while, Meng Qingqing came in and looked outside. When he saw Tang Yu, he coughed lightly. Not done yet. Tang Yu smiled faintly. He straightened his clothes and asked nonchalantly, "What's settled?" "Acquisition." Meng Qingqing sighed. It's obvious that old Master Lin is protecting her. But how long can this last? If your blind date is successful, I think Pei Chi-Chi will be abandoned by old Master Lin. Tang Yu snorted and walked back to his seat. He tidied up the documents and looked up. Do you think that day will come? Also, don't make Pei Chi-Chi sound stupid. He paused and shook his head. Maybe we've all underestimated her. Because their opponents were them, they had always thought that she was vulnerable. But through this time, she fought back forcefully and beautifully, delaying the acquisition. How should he put it? Whether it was in terms of economics or human relations, Shang Yuan couldn't do anything to the Pei group for the time being, unless he fell out with his grandfather, but that was obviously impossible. So that's it? Meng Qingqing sat down at the conference table and asked with a burning gaze, "Look at Pei Shaoqi today. Those two men are really good-looking. Do you think Pei Shaoqi will be angry, just like you and Sun Feifei?" "Sun Feifei and I have never started." Tang Yu rolled his eyes at him. Of course, his Chi-Chi wouldn't either. No matter how angry they were at each other, their bodies belonged to each other, and so did their hearts. Tang Yu was certain of this, however. When he spoke, his tone was somewhat impetuous. It was obvious that he was jealous. How could Meng Qingqing not hear it? He chuckled, rolled up the document and tapped it on his palm. "Tang Yu, you're quite funny when you're jealous." Tang Yu snorted coldly and ignored him. Was he jealous? He wouldn't be. Back in his office, he dialed a number and transferred it to Old Master Lin. Old Master Lin went straight to the point. "Have you seen that girl?" Tang Yu smiled bitterly. "Grandfather, why are you doing this?" "Of course I'm worried. Although you promised me a blind date, I feel that your mind is still on that girl. I have to be on guard." Tang Yu sighed softly. "I said I'll go, so I'll really go." Chapter 468. Tang Yu pursed his lips and did not say anything. Grandpa Shang was unhappy. "Tang Yu, no matter how much you want it, it's impossible for you to be with that girl again." "Grandfather, are you that confident?" Tang Yu's tone was indifferent. Old Master Lin scoffed. "Take a look if you don't believe me. I believe that she has me in her heart." Tang Yu said calmly. This time, the old master was furious. "Tang Yu, you promised to go on a blind date before." Tang Yu smiled lightly. "But I didn't say who I was going to marry, did I? This scoundrel." Was this scoundrel Lin Jinnan's outstanding grandson? Old Master Lin was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at him. He hung up the phone. At that moment, he actually felt like he was supporting that girl and helping Tang Yu train that girl. How was this a breakup? How was this hostility? It was simply flirting with each other. The old master was furious, but he could not do anything to Tang Yu. Very good. This grandson had used the words feigning obedience in secret to the extreme. Very good. Old Master Lin sighed. He hoped that the girl would hold on and insist on not being with Tang Yu. Perhaps after a few years, Tang Yu would slowly lose interest in her. However, how could it be lost? No matter what, Lin Jinnan would not change his words and decisions. Since he had promised that girl, he would not go back on his word. The cooperation between Marvel and the Pei Corporation was about to begin. For this, Marvel specially held a press conference and a rather impressive banquet. At the press conference, the CEO of Marvel interacted with Pei Chi-Chi in a very gentlemanly manner. He was a man in his early 30s. He was quite young and handsome. His name was Wang Ziki, and he had a good reputation in the industry. He leaned forward and looked down. After a while, he shifted his gaze to Pei Chi beside him. I look forward to working with Boss Pei. I believe it will be very enjoyable. After saying that, he placed the microphone next to Pei Chi's lips and looked at her with a smile. He was quite gentlemanly. Pei Chi also said a few words and then answered the reporter's questions. Boss Pei, Marvel is a subsidiary of the Lin Consortium. Does Boss Pei mind that the Lin Consortium and Sheng Yuan have a warm relationship? Pei Chi smiled. Business is business. We only talk about benefits. I think personal feelings should be put aside. Immediately, a reporter caught the loophole in her words. Boss Pei, you said personal feelings. Do you still have feelings for Mr. Tang Yu? I think that's what we all want to know. Pei Chi was stunned for a moment. She did not expect the reporters to be so tricky. However, Wang Ziki helped her out of the situation. He smiled and leaned closer. Boss Pei also said just now that personal feelings are personal and business matters are business. Today is the press conference for the cooperation between Marvel and the Pei Corporation. Chapter 469. But after seeing Pei Chi, who would reject such a beautiful girl? Even if he knew that it would never be possible, it was nice to see her every now and then. Men understood men the best. Wang Ziki could understand why Tang Yu was so dead set on Pei Chi. He didn't tell Pei Chi that he was considered Tang Yu's senior. When they were studying abroad, they were 3 years older. They knew each other, but they weren't close. Of course, when it came to Pei Chi's beauty, he only admired it. He didn't have any possessive thoughts. Because once a woman loved Tang Yu, it would be hard for her to fall in love with someone else. No matter what, he had to make do. And Wang Ziki himself was a little proud. He didn't want to be made do, so he just admired it for a while. And when it came to the banquet, Wang Ziki was amazed by it. He was a very elegant man, not the kind of impatient pervert. Leaning in a corner of the banquet hall, he looked at Pei Chi, who was dressed in a smoky gray evening gown. The top was of a xiongxiong design, and the layers of gauze didn't seem complicated at all. Instead, it looked light and graceful, especially the skirt, which was very elegant and retro. Because the color of the evening gown was dark, she used Dior 888 lipstick today, which made her delicate skin look even more like white porcelain. Wang Ziki wanted to go forward, but someone beat him to it. He was a little surprised that Qin Anlin from King Entertainment would appear here, but he quickly got over it. Marvel and King Entertainment had a lot of collaborations, but they were all done by their underlings. Wang Ziki and Qin Anlin didn't have much interaction. He just vaguely knew that Qin Anlin was ruthless, so they didn't have the intention to be friends because they had different paths. Wang Ziki saw Qin Anlin walk over to Pei Chi. He turned his head and asked his secretary, "Did you give the invitation to King Entertainment?" His secretary said in a low voice, "Yes, he did. However, these social events are usually attended by Manager Lin. I don't know why CEO Qin came alone today." Wang Ziki gestured for her to say no more. The reason? He thought he knew. Women. If Qin Anlin could show up, so could Tang Yu. Wang Ziki's originally somewhat indifferent thoughts became even more indifferent. He thought that he might be able to enjoy a good show today. Thinking of this, Zhang Xian felt a little better. Qin Anlin walked straight to Pei Chi. Pei Chi was talking to Xiao Wan, explaining something seriously. As Qin Anlin got closer, he could see her face that was as beautiful as an oil painting more clearly. Really, he had never seen a girl's face that was so vivid. If she was willing to enter the entertainment industry, he could make her into a superstar. It was definitely not something that those popular young stars could compare to. She was so beautiful that her eyes could drown a man in them. Her every expression was a vivid painting. Decades later, everyone would still remember a girl named Pei Chi. Finally, he stood in front of her and smiled. "Miss Pei." Pei Chi looked up and saw Qin Anlin unexpectedly. Why was he here? Qin Anlin was dressed in a black formal suit. He was extraordinarily handsome, and he exuded a slightly demonic aura. He had always been the dream of the upper-class ladies, the person they wanted to sleep with, but he was also the nightmare of the daughters of wealthy families, because falling in love with him would not end well. Chapter 470. Pei Chi raised her head and looked at Qin Anlin. After a long time, she smiled slightly. President Qin. Qin Anlin put one hand in his trouser pocket, looked around, and smiled. In fact, you can call me Anlin. Pei Chi pursed her lips and did not say a word. Qin Anlin smiled. Why didn't Tang Yu come on such an important day? Logically speaking, he should appear on such an occasion even if it was for the Lin family. With Lin Jinrong in such a state, the Lin family did not have any juniors who could show up. Tang Yu would have to inherit the Lin Corporation in the future. Therefore, Tang Yu should appear at tonight's banquet. At least, it would give the Lin Corporation's employees some peace of mind. President Qin is not here to be a reporter, is he? Pei Chi admitted that her voice was a little sharp, but she really could not stand Qin Anlin's probing. He was obviously up to no good. If I were a reporter, I would definitely get to know Boss Pei better. Qin Anlin leaned close to her and spoke in a low voice. However, their posture also made people feel especially intimate. At least in the eyes of Tang Yu, who had just entered, it was too intimate. He was accompanied by Prince Qi and a group of senior executives of Marvel. They walked into the magnificent hall like stars surrounding the moon. All the lights lost their color for a moment. Pei Chi looked up and looked into Tang Yu's eyes. He stopped in his tracks, and everyone behind him stopped in their tracks as well. Pei Chi did not know how intimate she was with Qin Anlin at that moment. Qin Anlin bent down and pressed his lips against her ear. To be honest, this fellow was also very good-looking. Standing next to Pei Chi, they actually looked very compatible. She was completely unaware of this as she stared blankly at Tang Yu. She only felt that his expression was somewhat ugly. Tang Yu's eyes narrowed. Wang Ziki smiled. Mr. Tang, do you need to meet Boss Pei? President Qin is also here. We're old friends. It was really quite good. It wasn't just Wang Ziki. Everyone was ready to watch the show. The matter between Tang Yu and Pei Chi was a big deal in B City, and many people had been watching it. There were rumors that they had broken up, and there were also rumors that they were still together. Miss Sun was just cannon fodder. Pei Chi blushed as she saw Tang Yu walking towards them. Qin Anlin's voice rang in his ears. Boss Pei, I'm guessing that Tang Yu will want to tear you apart later. Pei Chi was stunned. Then, she realized that Qin Anlin was very, very close to her. His lips were almost touching her ear when he said that. At that moment, she came back to her senses. She had been tricked by Qin Anlin. She looked up and saw Tang Yu's eyes. She trembled. Just like what Qin Anlin had said, he would tear her apart. Her body trembled. She didn't know whether it was because of fear or excitement. Qin Anlin looked at Pei Chi's porcelain-like skin. His gaze deepened. Only then did he know what it meant to be delicate. She was so delicate that almost no pores could be found. It was hard to find another person with skin as clear as ice. His eyes were filled with a deep desire that even he couldn't understand. All these years, Qin Anlin had had many women. He also had hopes for them. However, that was only a physical need as a man, not a psychological desire. Chapter 471. Qin Anlin actually wanted to hold her in his arms. Even if they didn't do anything, just hugging her like this was good enough. He thought so, and so he did. Not only did he want to hug her, but he also wanted to see Tang Yu's reaction if he hugged her now. Wouldn't it be interesting? As for his desire for Pei Chi, he didn't want to magnify it, and he didn't want to think about it carefully. Because he didn't want to fall in love with a woman again. An arm suddenly wrapped around Pei Chi's waist, and then she was brought into a warm embrace. Pei Chi was stunned. Qin Anlin was doomed eternally. Everyone was dumbfounded. And Tang Yu, after pausing for a moment, sped up and reached them in a few steps. He grabbed Pei Chi's arm and pulled her to his side. She crashed into his embrace and only felt that his embrace was a little hard. Then, her little head was pressed by him, and her little face was buried in his shoulder. She could smell his burning breath on it. She wanted to get up, but Tang Yu pressed her little head down tightly, and then he threw a heavy punch at Qin Anlin. That punch was very heavy. Even though Qin Anlin was prepared, he was still hit. His body fell to the side, and there was a burst of screams. The wine glass fell to the ground, and the sound of it shattering was very clear, followed by Qin Anlin's muffled groan. Tang Yu was really ruthless. He stood up with difficulty, so that he wouldn't fall even more embarrassedly. He stood up straight and looked at Tang Yu. He reached out to touch the corner of his mouth that was stained with blood, wiped it off, looked at it, and then looked up. His voice was a little lazy. Is this punch for Shan Lian back then, or for Pei Chi today? Back then, when he slept with Shan Lian on Tang Yu's bed, Tang Yu didn't say a word. He just turned around and left. But now, he just hugged her. And he believed that Tang Yu could see that he was deliberately provoking her. With Tang Yu's cultivation and patience, he would usually be able to resolve it easily. However, it was obvious that Tang Yu cared about this little girl to the extreme, which was why he would throw a punch. For Tang Yu to have such a thing happen on such an occasion, it was unbelievable. It would definitely be on the hot search list tomorrow, and it would also blow up the relationship between him and Pei Chi. You don't want to admit it? Then Qin Anlin would force him to admit it. Tang Yu still held Pei Chi with one hand, not letting her see such a bloody scene. Pei Chi moved uneasily in his arms. Her little hand clenched into a fist. She hit his shoulder and said in a low voice, Tang Yu, let go of me. His body instantly tensed up, and he restrained his voice. Boss Pei, I haven't congratulated you. As he spoke, he lowered his head and planted a light kiss on her forehead. At that moment, a camera flashed, and he didn't know which reckless person it was. The scene was silent. Even the people taking pictures were stunned. They didn't expect their cell phones to flash. It was in this silence that Tang Yu's voice sounded very elegant. Boss Pei, this is a gift. The female employees covered their faces and almost screamed. Such a gift. Please give me a dozen. Pei Chi just looked at Tang Yu, stunned. What did he say? This is a gift. Chapter 472. Tang Yu gently pushed her body. Meng Qingcheng, who was behind him, naturally took over and pressed her little arm down to prevent her from moving. Meng Qingcheng, let go of me. She also forgot about the occasion and kicked the man behind her. Meng Qingcheng smiled bitterly. He had to press her down to prevent her from moving, but he couldn't get too close to her. Otherwise, what if Tang Yu finished dealing with Qin Anlin and then came to deal with him? For a moment, he was so tired that sweat appeared on his forehead. Tang Yu took off his coat and threw it to the attendant beside him. He looked at Qin Anlin calmly, while calmly unbuttoning the cufflinks of his shirt. The women present wanted to scream again. Not because they were afraid, but because, oh my God, are they going to fight? How could he be so elegant even when fighting? Mr. Tang's arms were so perfect and strong. If he hugged them, oh my God. Also, he was only wearing a shirt now, but his figure was so slender. Of course, President Qin was not bad either. Almost all the women were drooling. Only Pei Chi almost screamed. Tang Yu. Tang Yu was still slowly rolling up his sleeves. He didn't immediately turn his head when he heard that. Instead, he only asked calmly, Boss Pei, are you worried? Pei Chi looked at him and Qin Anlin staring at each other like two wild beasts, ready to fight at any time. Her heart beat faster. She didn't care about the others or the occasion. She said hoarsely, yes, yes. She looked at him longingly, hoping that he would change his mind. Tang Yu smiled gently, turned around, and looked at Pei Chi. His gaze was warm, and there was even a smile at the corner of his mouth. Pei Chi was a little dazed. She could never be immune to him. Be good and stay there for a while. He sounded like he was coaxing a child. Then, his voice was cold. Qingcheng, cover her eyes. Meng Qingcheng smiled bitterly and covered Pei Chi's eyes with his hand. He could guarantee that the scene would be very, very violent. However, did Tang Yu forget that tonight's banquet was being broadcasted live? Tang Yu and Qin Anlin stood face to face. He smiled faintly and said, if it was because of what happened in the past, I would have gotten it back then. I'm not a man who can endure it. Qin Anlin wiped his lower lip and sneered, then it must be because of Pei Chi-Chi. To be honest, he had wanted to beat up Tang Yu for a long time. He had wanted to tear apart his nobility for a long time. For so many years, he had never been able to fulfill his wish. Today, he had only hugged Pei Chi-Chi lightly, and Tang Yu had such a huge reaction. The two men were like two wild beasts fighting each other. The scene was so intense that it made people's hearts tremble. The women screamed again, this time because of the violence. Blood was like tap water. How was it not scary? Just that night, Tang Yu fell from the pedestal of nobility. On the contrary, Qin Anlin's image was much more refined because of his weakness. Tang Yu was completely barbaric. Moreover, based on the ferocity of the fight, how many times could the slender Pei Chi-Chi withstand his torment? This was what Meng Qingqing thought in his heart. In the banquet hall, the sound of glass shattering was incessant, and the glass fell to the ground. It was accompanied by the heavy breathing of the two men and Pei Chi-Chi's scream. Tang Yu, stop fighting. She kicked Meng Qingqing with all her might, but she couldn't break free. In the end, she had no choice but to lower her head and bite Meng Qingqing's wrist. Meng Qingqing let go of his hand subconsciously, but Pei Chi-Chi had already broken free from him. Chapter 473. Tang Yu's white shirt was stained with blood, and so was Qin Anlin. Their faces were more or less covered in blood, and it was quite a sight to behold. Pei Chi-Chi dashed over without thinking and hugged Tang Yu from behind. She murmured, "Tang Yu, stop hitting me." The moment her little hands hugged him, his anger was redeemed. He froze for a moment and looked down at the little hands that were hugging him. At this moment, Qin Anlin gave his handsome face a kick as well. That's why people say that Pei Chi-Chi is a pig-like teammate. Tang Yu took 2 steps back, but he managed to stabilize himself. He stretched out his long leg and gave a vicious kick, almost causing the Qin family's millions of descendants to explode. Qin Anlin groaned in pain and squatted down, covering an indescribable part of his body. Tang Yu pressed down on Pei Chi-Chi's hand with one hand to prevent her from escaping. He instructed Meng Qingqing coldly, "Send President Qin to the hospital." Meng Qingqing was also shocked. That kick just now was really vicious. He nodded and called for 2 more employees to send Qin Anlin away. The scene was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Pei Chi-Chi wanted to break free, but it was already too late. Tang Yu pressed down on her little hand, his voice extremely hoarse. "Pei Chi-Chi, do you care about me?" There were so many people around. She blushed and was anxious, afraid that he was injured too badly. She shook her head violently. Her body was dragged into his embrace, and she crashed into his embrace. Her waist was held tightly by his hands, and her whole body was pressed against him. She saw the blood on his body and was afraid that she would hurt him, so she only dared to struggle slightly. But Tang Yu's grip was even tighter. It was as if he had fused her into his own flesh and blood. He bent down slightly, and his face was very close to hers. "Pei Chi-Chi, don't you care?" His bloody fingers slowly caressed her red lips, gently caressing them, making her lips look even more seductive. She stared at him blankly, her small hand trying to touch the wound on his face. However, she was instantly caught by him. That little hand was raised up high, and then he kissed her. A deep, deep kiss, a French kiss. Their bodies were pressed against each other, and their lips were occupied by him. She was burning hot, as though something was about to break free. Slowly, her small white arms wrapped around his neck. She leaned into his embrace and kissed him back. Everyone saw that it was the kind of kiss that made people blush and their hearts beat faster. However, the scene was very beautiful. Someone had already secretly taken a photo. Pei Chi-Chi was intoxicated in his arms until Tang Yu released her little mouth. She was a little annoyed. She reached out and hit his chest with her small fist, but he caught it. "Come with me." Tang Yu's voice was a little tight. Pei Chi-Chi opened her mouth in a daze, and then she came back to her senses. This was the collaboration dinner between the Pei Corporation and Marvel. Although she had regained her senses, her body was carried by Tang Yu. A A standard princess carry. Her small body was carried in his arms, and they walked out of the banquet hall easily. When they passed by Wang Ziki, Tang Yu nodded slightly. You take care of the aftermath. Wang Ziki smiled and didn't say anything. Pei Chi wanted to struggle, but Tang Yu said in a low voice, if you move again, I'll throw you down. She was so scared that she immediately hugged him tightly, her small face in his arms obediently. His heart softened instantly, and he reached out to touch her head, as though he was petting a little pet. She hadn't been so soft in a long time, and he hadn't been so gentle in a long time. Chapter 474. Both of them did not want to quarrel on such a night. Anyway, the trouble had already happened. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Now, they just wanted to be together and enjoy the quiet night. They didn't have time to go anywhere else, so they booked a presidential suite on the upper floor of this hotel. Meng Qingsheng was so considerate. Both the TVS and the medical kit were prepared. Tang Yu carried Pei Chi into the suite and placed her on the sofa. She wanted to get up, but he pressed her down. Wait a minute, your foot has pricked the glass. This fool. She didn't even know that her foot was injured when she tried to stop him. Pei Chi only knew that her foot was pricked. She didn't feel any pain at first, but now she felt a piercing pain. Tang Yu let her sit down and looked at her deeply. She was very beautiful today, like a fairy in the forest, fresh and refined. It wasn't that he didn't understand Qin Anlin's gaze when he looked at her just now. Perhaps even Qin Anlin himself didn't know that when he looked at Chi, he was more passionate than when he looked at Shen Lian. Therefore, he couldn't control his violence. He didn't regret it. He grabbed one of her feet and said in a low voice, "Bear with it." His big hand held her little foot, and his heart started to beat faster. He endured it and picked up a pair of tweezers to help her take out the glass. She felt a little pain, and her little hand hugged one of his arms a little reliantly. Even so, Tang Yu's heart softened, and he looked up at her. Her eyes were watery, and she looked at him pitifully. Under her gaze, Tang Yu nibbled on her little foot. She widened her eyes and watched as he took turns to pamper her 5 little toes. Pei Chi never knew that her feet could be so sensitive. She bit her lip and meowed like a kitten. Tang Yu, don't kiss there. He finally looked up and looked at her with his clear eyes. His voice was unbelievably hoarse. So where do you want me to kiss you? She huddled there, trembling as pitifully as a small animal. Tang Yu slowly moved over and hovered above her. He said in a warm voice, Chi, where do you want me to kiss you? She was trembling uncontrollably. Compared to his strength, she was extremely weak. They had agreed to be enemies, but in the face of such strong hormones, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. And his breath was also hot as he moved closer to her little face. The tip of his nose started from her forehead and slowly moved downwards, bringing with it a touch of coolness and a touch of warmth. Slowly moving, it finally touched the tip of her nose. His thin lips pressed against her alluring little mouth. He didn't kiss her deeply. Where do you want me to kiss you? Pei Chi's eyelashes trembled, and she couldn't say a word. Her throat rolled uncontrollably. He leaned forward and stared at her with his deep eyes. Chi, be good. Tell me, where do you want me to kiss you? Pei Chi couldn't help but close her eyes. Her little hand clutched his shirt tightly. She was afraid that Tang Yu's gaze was enough to eat her up. His thin lips touched hers gently. Is it like this? She trembled and refused to speak. She bit her lip. That fragile look made him want to hug her in his arms and dote on her. Tang Yu looked at her deeply. After a long time, his body moved downwards. When he touched her, Pei Chi screamed, Tang Yu, not there. Chapter 475. It wasn't that he hadn't kissed her before, but at that time, they were deeply in love. And now, she didn't expect that he would still do that for her. Her heart was beating so fast that it almost stopped. Her little hand grabbed his black hair. and her whole body felt like it was being fished out of the water. Finally, her fingers let go of him, and she collapsed weakly. Tang Yu held her in his arms and kissed her bit by bit, from her eyebrows to her mouth. His palms moved downwards, and he took her on the sofa. It was as turbulent as a storm. She was always afraid that he would be in pain, so he picked her up and placed her in his arms. "Pei Chi, come here," he whispered in her ear. Her face was so red that it looked like it was going to bleed, but she still couldn't bear to leave him. Even though she wasn't used to it, she still hugged him and tried her best to cater to him. After a long time, everything was quiet. Pei Chi leaned into his arms and said softly, "Tang Yu, let me get up." He lifted his body slightly and looked at her. He smiled faintly and said, "Pei Chi, I'm not in pain." But her heart was in pain. It was so intense at that time. How could she not be in pain? Pei Chi propped her body up, and her little hand gently rubbed his chest. "Does it hurt here?" He looked at her exquisite face and beautiful features. Such a beautiful girl leaning in his arms and looking at him with a face full of worry. Even a saint would melt. Tang Yu was no exception. He lay there quietly, letting her little hand light a fire on his body. After a while, he said hoarsely, "It hurts there." He held her little hand and moved it downwards. Pei Chi was so hot that she almost jumped up. She struggled to move her little hand away, but he wouldn't let her. She glared at him and said childishly, "You beast." "Chi, if I can still resist a beautiful girl like you in my arms, then I'm worse than a beast." He laughed lowly. Although his body wasn't very satisfied, he was satisfied from the bottom of his heart. Pei Chi's face turned even redder. Tang Yu held her little hand and couldn't bear to let her do that. Holding her hand, he kissed it and closed his eyes. "Chi, let's lie down for a while. Don't break up with me. Don't tell me that I have a girlfriend." She looked up at him with his eyes closed, and a sense of emptiness passed through her heart. He didn't force her anymore, but why did her heart feel empty? However, Pei Chi wouldn't ask such an embarrassing question. She leaned forward for a while before saying, "Tang Yu, I want to take a shower." He lowered his head to look at her and kissed her forehead. Then, he carried her and walked towards the bathroom. In the bathroom, he couldn't help but want her twice. This time, not only her, but Tang Yu was also exhausted. He carried her back to the bedroom. Although they were weak, neither of them fell asleep. She curled up in his arms and quietly looked at the endless night outside. "Tang Yu, will we have to separate again when the sun rises?" Her voice was soft, revealing a touch of desolation and fragility. After the orgy, what was left was emptiness. There was no tomorrow for her and him. After tonight, when the sun rose tomorrow, he would call her Boss Pei and she would call him Mr. Tang. She was lost. Tang Yu hugged her little body in his arms and looked at the night with her. He lowered his head and kissed her soft little neck. "Chi, you can choose to stay forever." Chapter 476. Tang Yu did not force her. He pulled her into his arms and stroked her hair. "Pei Chi, sometimes, being stubborn isn't a good thing." She lay in his arms and felt his warmth. Suddenly, she felt aggrieved. She was a girl after all. Everyone knew that she slept with him without knowing why. Boss Pei was being unreasonable. That's why women shouldn't be spoiled. Her tears in his arms made his heart feel hot and wet, very uncomfortable. Tang Yu reached out and touched her long hair gently. He said in a low voice, "You can come back whenever you want." Hearing that, her tears flowed even more fiercely. Her little hands pounded on his chest, and she even moved her mouth to bite him. Tang Yu's heart felt warm and wet as well. He could not describe the feeling in his heart. How could he not know the pain in her heart? Just as she said, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. There were some things about her that he could not understand. "So, Chi, I'm willing to wait for you to think it through." She bit him. It was actually painful, but she endured it. She lowered her head to look at his fluffy little head and kissed it. Then, she rubbed it even tighter. She cried until she felt weak. She lay in his arms without moving, but her little hands were still tugging on his sleeve. Tang Yu pushed aside her messy long hair and looked at her. Her eyes and nose were red from crying, especially her pink eyelids. When she blinked, a tear rolled down. Tang Yu lowered his head and sucked the tear off. He sucked it gently and then moved to her alluring little mouth. As he kissed, he murmured, "Chi-Chi, you're making my heart hurt." When he kissed her, she seemed to be shocked. Her body curled up even more. Then, she reached out and pounded on him indignantly. He let her do as she pleased. He let her get angry at him. He knew that he had not treated her well recently. It was very bad. It was almost torture. However, if he did not do that, she would fly away in the blink of an eye. He could not catch her. If that happened, he would be even more unreconciled and even angrier. He couldn't guarantee that she would still be in his arms, so safe and sound. Now, even if she was throwing a tantrum like this, he still felt that it was very wonderful. His voice was very soft. "Chi-Chi, do you feel better now?" She did not speak, but put her arms around his neck. This bastard only knew how to force her and make things difficult for her. Her little hands were still clenched into fists, and she pounded hard on his back, biting his neck unwillingly. "Okay, good girl, don't make trouble." Tang Yu patted her small shoulder, gently coaxing. But how could he coax his little girl at this moment? She was as bad as he was to her. She bit him and refused to let go. Her small body was fragrant and soft, and the bathrobe hanging on her body was really very alluring. "Baby, can you come down?" She was pestering him to the point that his soul almost left his body. Her voice was also a little unsteady. It was not that he did not want to hug her, but he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself if he hugged her. Pei Chi-Chi refused and hugged and bit him tightly. The two of them were like conjoined twins. He felt helpless and sweet at the same time. The fight tonight was worth it. Actually, his cell phone kept ringing. It was from Meng Qingsheng and Old Master Lin. He roughly knew why. It was because he had slept with his enemy's daughter again. Chapter 477. Perhaps he would let down many people, but he didn't want to let down himself, or Chi-Chi. Such a young girl followed him. How could he bear to throw her away? At this time, Mr. Tang felt pity for the fairer sex. He hugged her and coaxed her gently. "All right, Chi-Chi, be good." But she was always disobedient and clung to him. He had no choice but to scare her. "If you continue like this, I'll kiss you." That cute little face was buried in his arms. Her long hair had long been hopelessly scattered, messy like a little lunatic. He pulled her long hair and sighed as he looked at her beautiful little face. In the end, he kissed her lightly and said in a seductive voice, "Chi-Chi, baby, do you want me to kiss you?" She pursed her lips and licked her lips gently, as if she was tasting him. Looking up at his beautiful lips, she leaned forward and kissed him again. Her intoxicated expression reminded Tang Yu of the one and only time Pei Chi-Chi had secretly smoked. Now, she was infatuated with him. Such a discovery made him feel extremely satisfied, and he just looked at her indifferently. Pei Chi-Chi sat up on her knees, her little hands still hugging his neck, and kissed him like a little beast. Tang Yu pressed her little head. "Pei Chi-Chi, am I that easy to sleep with?" His thin lips moved close to her ear. "If you want to sleep with me, you need to get a marriage certificate." Pei Chi-Chi was stunned, and then there was a trace of moisture in her eyes. He said, "Get a marriage certificate." "Marriage?" She looked up at him, helpless and vulnerable. She didn't dare. "Maybe you can say that you love me." He searched for her lips, bit it gently, and said seductively, "Say that you love me, and I'll let you sleep with me once." Pei Chi-Chi kicked him angrily, but she was carried into his arms. "Baby, or should I say that I love you, and I'll sleep with you once, okay?" He coaxed her shamelessly, his voice low. After that, Tang Yu said, "I love you" 4 times and slept with her 4 times. After that, the man leaned close to the girl's ear and teased, "Good girl, do you want to listen anymore?" Pei Chi covered her ears and curled up in his arms. Her body was still trembling. His large palm covered her small hand and hugged her whole in his arms. Although it was very soft, she heard it clearly. "I'll wait for you to come back." Damn it. She felt like crying again. Even though she knew that she shouldn't, that she was being too selfish, and that it would bring too much negativity to him, she still wavered. She wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face in his chest. "Tang Yu, give me some time," he grunted. After a while, he smiled softly. "That's right. Sheng Yuan will not stop suppressing the Pei Consortium unless Boss Pei says I am willing now." All the good things had disappeared. Beast. She glared at him. She looked so cute even when she was angry. Tang Yu stroked her hair and smiled. "Chi, actually you're good enough." There's nothing about whether you're worthy or not. Also, don't say that you're Zhao Ke's daughter anymore. I don't care, so why should you care? His eyes were full of warmth. It was the Tang Yu of the past. Pei Chi bit her lips, her little hands carefully caressing his handsome face. "Tang Yu," she meowed pitifully like a kitten. Chapter 478. Pei Chi slapped his handsome face. "You're worse than a beast." However, in the blink of an eye, she was pressed under his body. "Worse than a beast?" "Pei Chi, you said it yourself." His voice was hoarse and dangerous. His entire body was filled with the charm of a mature man. She was like a puddle of spring water, and then she turned into a little wild cat. Therefore, she was in a mess, regardless of everything, pain, and pleasure. Pei Chi was hurt by him, and Tang Yu's body was badly scratched by the wild cat. Especially his chest and back. There were many bloody marks. Pei Chi had never been so violent before, but this little violence made both of them very happy. When she woke up early in the morning, she opened her eyes and looked into a pair of deep eyes. Deep and warm. Suddenly, there was an indescribable palpitation and bitterness in her heart. She hugged his waist with her little hands and buried her face in his warm chest. "Tang Yu, you've been indulging me, haven't you?" "No, I've been forcing you, Boss Pei." His tone was quite relaxed. Pei Chi hit him with her little hand and suddenly put her face on his neck. "You promised not to stare." Because she had already felt it. Tang Yu was helpless. "Boss Pei, if a man doesn't even have this reaction in the morning, you should be crying." She hit him with her little hand. "It's your son Fei Fei who is going to cry." There was a hint of anger and childishness in her words. No matter whether she was Boss Pei or not, in front of Tang Yu, she was still a young girl in her 20s. A little thing that he could call a baby. He laughed deeply and looked down at the little girl in his arms. "Are you jealous?" "Of course not." She pinched his waist with her fingertips. "Why would I be jealous? Mr. Tang said that son Fei Fei wouldn't mind anything before marriage, but after marriage, she would break up with me." She raised her little face and looked a little mischievous. "Then I'll wait for you to get married and then leave." "Mr. Tang, am I very sensible?" He squinted at her and ruffled her hair. Vengeful little thing. Pei Chi held his arm and gently pulled it down. She hugged his arm in her arms and said seriously, "Tang Yu, I don't have anyone else. I know you probably haven't thought it through, and neither have I. But before we make a decision, don't let anyone else interfere." This was her request. Her love and feelings were not unconditional. If he was really with son Fei Fei, then she would never be with him again. Tang Yu looked at her deeply. He did not know what had changed her. He only knew that he was very touched that she could say such words at this time. At the very least, she was willing to consider the possibility between them. She no longer excluded him from her life like before. His large palm caressed her little face, and his voice was a little hoarse. "Chi, I've never been with anyone before." As he spoke, he suddenly chuckled. "Didn't I use that box of 001 on you?" Pei Chi glared at him. "Then you Want me to use it on Sun Feifei? He bit her little ear. Pei Chi almost jumped up. He held her little body tightly and let her lean on his shoulder. His large palm caressed her little fluffy head, and his voice was very low. Chi, I can let you fly, but remember to come back when you're tired. He said it in a deep voice as if he had experienced many things. Chapter 479. She really felt that she was disappointing. He had been so despicable before. She buried herself in his arms and said disappointedly, Tang Yu, when you feel that you have the courage to come back to me. He smiled warmly and kissed her forehead. Pei Chi's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at his handsome face in a daze. He reached out and pinched her little nose. He lifted the blanket and got up. Boss Pei, are you interested in taking a shower together, or doing it again? Her answer was to throw a pillow at him. Tang Yu caught it and put it back. Boss Pei, it's not a good habit to hit people. You have to change it. As he said that, he turned and walked towards the bathroom. He tore off his bathrobe and showed the scratches on his back. Pei Chi immediately covered her face. Her face was so red that it seemed like it was bleeding. When Tang Yu came out of the shower, Pei Chi was already gone. However, Meng Qingqing magically appeared with a set of clothes. When he saw Tang Yu come out, he raised his eyebrows. Where's Pei Chi? I don't believe that you were alone last night. As he said that, he looked around for a long time. Tang Yu said calmly, I think he left first. She left in his clothes, because the tuxedo was still on the ground. After Tang Yu said that, he reached out to take off his bathrobe and began to change. Meng Qingqing's eyes widened. Tang Yu's body was covered in scratches, including his neck. How intense was it last night? Also, he had never seen Tang Yu fight before. That ferocious. How could Pei Chi's small body withstand Tang Yu's unlocking? Meng Qingqing handed over the clothes. He was a little puzzled. Tang Yu didn't seem to mind that he had left. He seemed to be in a good mood. Tang Yu was wearing fine clothes and looked incomparably noble. Of course, he bent down to pick up Pei Chi's gown. She looked good in it. He could wear it for him at home in the future. Meng Qingqing stared at Tang Yu for a long time before he noticed the unconcealable hickey on his neck. He coughed lightly and said, Tang Yu has left, but the reporters are still outside. How are you going to explain this to them? First of all, he couldn't get past old Master Lin. Tang Yu smiled faintly. What do you have to say? All he did was spend a night with the woman he wanted and do what he wanted. From Tang Yu's reaction, Meng Qingqing knew that he had decided to be with Pei Chi. In fact, although Pei Chi's identity wasn't made clear, Meng Qingqing was smart enough to guess it right away. He didn't think highly of Tang Yu's relationship either. After all, for men, especially men like Tang Yu, love wasn't enough. It wasn't like he could marry Pei Chi just because he wanted to. Sometimes, responsibility was more important than anything else. If old Master Lin Yun, and the Lin family didn't let go, then Tang Yu and Pei Chi's marriage would cause turmoil in Shang Yuan and the Lin family. It wasn't a small matter unless Tang Yu gave up on everything, but that was impossible. Tang Yu was the hope of both the Lin and Tang families. Tang Yu couldn't selfishly give up on everything. So in the end, he could only let Pei Chi suffer. Meng Qingqing understood Tang Yu's difficulties. He smiled and said, Old Master Lin probably had a good impression of Pei Chi a few days ago, but it was all gone after you slept with him tonight. Chapter 480. Meng Qingqing stared blankly. What about now? Go out to face the reporters and then go back to the old mansion. Tang Yu smiled slightly. He said it very casually, but Meng Qingqing did not think so. The old master was not that easy to deal with. He would definitely be furious about this. Do you want to hide for 2 days? We'll talk about it after the limelight dies down, Meng Qingqing said. He knew that Tang Yu was not afraid of the old master, but he respected him. The old master was used to being powerful all his life. He just did not want a rebel. What he did not know was that Tang Yu had other plans in his heart. Pei Chi and the old master had a deal. She did not say it, but he could guess and was sure. He wanted to find out the truth this time when he went back. What's more, he took Chi away in front of the whole world. The whole world probably knew that they slept together last night. He had to give the old master an explanation. Like what he said just now, he was the one who forced her. At that moment, he had to deal with the reporters first. He walked out of the hotel with Ming Qingqing by his side. Behind him were Shang Yuan's 4 bodyguards. At the entrance of the Four Seasons Hotel, all the cameras were aimed at Tang Yu, especially the suspicious marks on his neck. It was obvious that they were scratched by a woman when she moved her eyes. In an instant, the cameras were everywhere, taking pictures crazily. "Mr. Tang, did you spend the night with Boss Pei of the Pei Corporation last night?" the female reporter asked excitedly. "Mr. Tang, according to the hospital, one of President Qin's ribs was broken last night. I want to ask, were you too ruthless? Did you do this because of Boss Pei?" "Mr. Tang, aren't you worried that it will affect your personal image or Shang Yuan's stock price by doing this with President Qin?" Tang Yu did not answer such questions. The reporters did not give up. Countless microphones were placed by his lips. Tang Yu only walked towards the black limousine, unbuttoning 2 buttons as he walked. When he got into the car, a reporter squeezed in front of him and asked excitedly, "Shang Yuan and the Pei Corporation should be enemies now. Why are Mr. Tang and Boss Pei still together?" Tang Yu sat in the luxurious car, looking incomparably noble. Ming Qingqing was about to close the car door when Tang Yu reached out to stop her. He smiled at the female reporter and said, "This is a sex scene." The female reporter was stunned. The shiny black car door had already closed in front of her. This was like 2 different worlds. It was as if Mr. Tang could tell her that this kind of complicated and unreasonable feeling was called love. Mortals would not be able to understand. Or perhaps this was the world of the rich. In the black limousine, Tang Yu asked Ming Qingqing lightly, "Did Qin Anlin really break a rib?" Ming Qingqing's small eyes drifted over, and she sighed softly. "Yes." Thinking about it, the flirtatious President Qin would probably not be able to touch women for a month. The small celebrities of King Entertainment would be lonely. Tang Yu did not say anything. That was because he would not be any better than Qin Anlin in a while. The car drove for about an hour before they arrived at the Lin family's old residence where Old Master Lin lived. Ming Qingqing had been here several times, but he was still not used to it. Tang Yu got out of the car and coughed softly when he opened the door. "Wait outside. The scene would not be good later." Tang Yu was a proud man. Even Qingqing did not want him to see him in a sorry state. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.